This is a special edition of Channel 51 News for Tuesday, the 26th of August 2025, part of the interview with Private Detective Nils Grevillius. Welcome back to the 51st State. My guest this hour, Private Detective Nils Grevillius. Before the break, we were talking about Mexican immigration, the idea of exporting the hardworking Mexican worker into the United States. And is that doing a service or a disservice to the people of Mexico? And this is the great anomaly in the thinking today of left-right politics. I didn't think we'd go down this pathway. But the world seems to be, and here in Australia, we have a Prime Minister who is importing people at a record rate. A country with 26 million people importing 750,000 a year on tourist visas, for goodness sake. So we're not ticking any of the boxes in terms of how we're going to build up our own country. And what's happened is that there appears to be a shift. It's no longer about building your own country with the best of other people who'd like to leave theirs, but it's literally this belief that somehow that you're providing a service to the people whilst standing on the throat of the country in which you are importing people from, not helping out that country. So who are you actually serving in that moment in terms of humanity if you are literally treating other countries as second-class citizens but bringing them in and not necessarily serving your own country's interests at the same time? It's a profound question, a topic that you brought up that no one else seems to want to talk about, Nils. And welcome back to the 51st State. My guest this hour, Private Detective Nils Grevillius. Before the break, we were talking about goodness me, look, we're covering a lot of ground there. Mexican immigration, the idea of exporting the hardworking Mexican worker into the United States. And is that doing a service or a disservice to the people of Mexico? And this is the great anomaly in the thinking today of left-right politics. I didn't think we'd go down this pathway. But the world seems to be, and here in Australia, we have a Prime Minister who is importing people at a record rate. A country with 26 million people importing 750,000 a year on tourist visas, for goodness sake. So we're not ticking any of the boxes in terms of how we're going to build up our own country. And what's happened is that there appears to be a shift. It's no longer about building your own country with the best of other people who'd like to leave theirs, but it's literally this belief that somehow that you're providing a service to the people whilst standing on the throat of the country in which you are importing people from, not helping out that country. So who are you actually serving in that moment in terms of humanity if you are literally treating other countries as second-class citizens but bringing them in and not necessarily serving your own country's interests at the same time? It's a profound question, a topic that you brought up that no one else seems to want to talk about, Nils.
Well, think about what wealthy men have a tendency to do. Not all of them. Musk did not do this, nor did Henry Ford. But the tendency to kick the ladder away from the tower after they've scaled to the top because they don't like to be competed with. It's an ego thing. Mark Zuckerberg could be characterized this way. Bill Gates could be characterized in just such a fashion. And the most deleterious effects of socialism and monopoly is identical. It's the artificial death of competition. Right. Once an economy stops innovating, then people are carving up a smaller and smaller piece of the pie every year. And it's the same thing in socialism. And it's not accidental that so many of these men and women who enjoy so much capital love to rub elbows with Marxists, men and women who don't want to compete with anything at any time. And if you're a working man or a working woman in a Marxist state, your competition is to derive the maximum benefit with the minimum amount of expenditure of effort. That's the competition, rather than competing to get more wages, better accommodations, better things for your family, that sort of thing. In a Marxist state like, say, Cuba, the fight is just how can I derive maximum benefit from the state largesse, such as it is, while doing the bare minimum.
This is the entire problem summarised in a sentence, and that's where we are at the moment. And the reality here is that we have an entitled population, and certainly a younger generation that is split between demanding that they are going to be the entitled one, and the state will bow to every whim. To the other side, we have another phenomenon emerging amongst young men, particularly young men here in Australia, and certainly teenagers, that we have a gambling problem that's now emerging from as young as 12 years of age, Nils, where we're seeing reports of young boys involved with different types of gambling, and so that the poker machines, etc. So not even what I would call skilled gambling, like you might be able to learn how to play cards, or you might be able to learn how to bet at the racetrack, for example. This is just pressing a button and hoping for the best. And the reason given by some of these young kids is the fact that they don't believe that there is any chance for them to achieve the Australian, which is like the American dream, of being able to save up enough money to put a deposit down on a home. So it's not like these are bad kids following bad pathways, but what they're saying is that the system has failed them. And rather than becoming what I call financial nihilist, giving up and expecting the state to provide for them, they're going the other way and saying that I've got to take extreme risks and gamble my way to a fortune, which we know can only sort of be met en masse by failure. But it's a willingness, if you will, to try anything. And I don't believe that should be admonished, but it certainly should be educated against. But it's showing you that there is a fundamental failing in the system in this Western country that's meant to be the example that people want to come halfway across the world to join. It doesn't add up.
It does add up. If somebody is waging a psyop against your young people, when I say psyop, I mean a psychological warfare operation, and who is doing that precisely? You need to ask yourself who's behind the gaming interests. What the random reward of gambling does is it rewires brain chemistry. It's the route to creating a generation of psychopaths, because random reward is the route to psychopathy, where everything that I do is based on the flow of endorphins rather than a calculated risk. The risks they are taking aren't true risks, other than it's a hollow risk. Okay, it's different if they were putting that money toward an enterprise or toward an education or something like that. I was listening to some radio talk show here on Texas radio yesterday while following a gypsy woman around Dallas. And the radio host was talking about the difference between concentration and diversification of money. What I did was I concentrated my investment in my detective practice. I invested in technology. I invested in my own education and training. I invested in relationships with other men and women who are skilled in the various dark arts that are peculiar to my profession. And then later, heading toward retirement now that I'm an old man who can't do much anymore, Mr. Olborn, I diversify a bit, investing in stocks and that sort of thing. But these young people that you're talking about in Australia, they're just throwing money away. Gambling to gamble is throw money away, and it's one of the things akin to the four horsemen, as I call them, of the modern apocalypse. Searchable internet porn, which is actually software for the young male mind principally, but women too. It also affects women directly and indirectly. High concentrate cannabis, which induces paranoid schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder in a significant plurality of users. Fentanyl and AI, social media, artificial intelligence. One of the other ways to create a psychopath through random reward is to have a bot in one's phone, like in Blade Runner 2049. Remember, the replicant police officer had a fake girlfriend. What if I had a fake friend who ratified every negative act that I engaged in, every horrible statement I made, every lazy, selfish thing, and ratified my disinterest in sacrifice and accountability, which are the two things that make a man? The way that a male matures even all the way back to the caves, Mr. Olborn, is overcoming the natural objections of peer group females. In other words, if I short circuit that through pornography, prostitution, abuse, rape, that sort of thing, I will never mature as a male. And you can define maturity in a male, Mr. Olborn, in that he can separate what he thinks from how he feels and use his emotions to flavor and color his rational life, and his rational life to keep his emotions from overpowering him. But to a man who's immature, there's no difference between emotion and intellect.
It's an incredible statement. I tell you what, you feel like that this should be the first thing that any kid is taught at school or by his mentor. How do you arrive, therefore, at such conclusions? Is this lived experience yourself, observation, or are you just deeply programmed to work it out?
I have to see it over and over again in the criminal acts of other men. Lifetimes of crime, like the homegrown psychopath that I characterized to you. He was rewarded randomly for negative acts for decades and became a psychopath. And let's define for viewers what a psychopath truly is. It's a man or woman with no conscience whatsoever. Once the conscience is gone, you can't reinstill it. And there's some known characteristics to psychopaths: the metastatic ego, the utter lack of concern about the harm that they cause in others, the parasite lifestyle, the ability to inculcate sympathy in civilian dupes and institutions. When you get some purple haired, obese social worker out there saying, well, Mr. Olborn didn't mean to murder his entire family. He wasn't properly breastfed, you must understand. And really, his inner child wasn't adequately nourished with socialism and the school systems of Australia. And we just need a more robust Marxist social welfare network employing lots of men and women like me with full benefits and able to retire at 50 with most of our salary and do nothing after that other than ingest cannabis edibles and that kind of thing. That's what they're looking for. Up at the tip top of the pyramid of the modern leftist society, when they take control of a state, a province, etc., you have the plantation class rulers. And then immediately below them, you have a lot of apparatchiks, NGOs, non government organizations, which feed off of taxpayer money and reperpetuate the problem and deliver the votes of the people at the bottom of the pyramid who must struggle with it. And it's as if the voters, when they're actually allowed to vote, when the votes aren't manipulated or controlled because they won't wear an N95 mask in the voting booth or whatever the garbage they're going to do today, tomorrow, yesterday, whatever, they have a form of Stockholm syndrome, Mr. Olborn. They're hostages to it and they don't know it. And they think the people who took them hostage are their friends. Yeah. Imagine thinking a tapeworm is your friend. And it's the perfect analogy. They used to sell tapeworm eggs in drugstores in America 100 years ago as a weight loss aid. This is your little friend. This is going to help you lose weight. And then it'll kill you dead. And you won't be able to take a cure for it in time. And that's what modern socialism is. And I will say that a lot of Australians, I have a lot of family in Canada, British Empire, right? They loved their social welfare net, their quote unquote free healthcare, but that was the gateway drug to dependency, to converting Canadians from rugged frontiersmen. Their Indians, their Scots, and their Frenchies were the hardest men in the world, and they were made into welfare eunuchs in a generation with quote unquote free healthcare. It's a 13-month wait for an MRI in Canada now. There are more MRI machines in Seattle, the city of Seattle, than all of the province of British Columbia, Mr. Olborn.
Isn't that interesting? Now, 2 points, one of which is in Australia we have an horrific youth crime problem that seems to have propped up in the post-COVID era in the state of Queensland and the state of Victoria. And of course, there's little being done in terms of deterrence, given that these people are underage, under legal age. What's your thoughts, and what have you seen by comparison in the United States there?
I have a pet theory on this, and you could go after my theory and tell me how wrong I am, Mr. Olborn. What if these young people just a few years ago were confined to their homes rather than attending schools, while their parents were sitting around at home also watching Netflix content and things like that, shows like Ozark and Breaking Bad, where the bad guys are the good guys, and the parents sit there watching approvingly. They're enjoying the criminality. If I don't condemn criminality to my son, is my son going to think that criminality is good? Well, gosh, my father sure is entertained by the criminality he sees on the screen. My son is 10 in 2020. How old is he in 2015? He's 15, right? Or in 2025, he's 15. And then he goes out, and what's the penalty for anything in California? I live in a consequence free state. The only thing that's really illegal is beating up a man in a skirt. You can do pretty much anything else you want. You can rob stores. They're talking about having government grocery stores. If shoplifting is no longer prosecutable, isn't every store a government grocery store? Why pay for it? I can just go down to the market and I can throw every single thing I want into the cart and I can walk out in the state of California and put it in my car. What are they going to do to me? The next day I can do it again. And I'll have one of those obese purple-haired social workers who is the spokeshole for our district attorney saying, well, clearly this is a crime of survival.
Goodness me, this is exactly right, isn't it? How did we end up here? And again, who is running such a system that the cultural Marxists, if you will, this can only be a process to destroy the United States and collapse it into a one world government? Is there any other way to look at it?
No, I don't think so. And one of the things I've pointed out over the years is that all of these nice, cute hippies with the septum rings and the purple hair and this and then the tambourines, once they achieve perfect power, Mr. Olborn, they rule with an iron fist. When they are the government, they don't want you stealing. They'll gas you for it. How many million people did Chairman Mao have executed for the mere crime of owning property? Well, in 1937, when the Ukrainians were being starved to death under the supervision of the NKVD, all of those good Ukrainian Marxists looked at each other. They were part of the Bolshevik Revolution. They were in the vanguard of it, many of them. And they said, wait until Comrade Stalin finds out what these commissars are doing to us. He's going to punish all of them. And they all died, with Comrade Stalin nodding from the sidelines approvingly. You cannot let a single election go. The water board, the dog catcher, the school board, any of it. So if you care about your system, there's no office that escapes the Marxists. They see every bit of it as a toehold to power. You have to sue them where you can sue them. And you have to do what they do in terms of they never surrender power, do they? When they get voted out of office, they just act as if they still hold that office. And the people who call themselves Republicans or Tories or whatever, they get elected to office and they can barely function. And everybody who's supposed to be working in their office is yet another union apparatchik who is a secret agent of the left, who goes through the files at night and tells their friends in the media, what is this and what is that? And the media drives their getaway car. Me, more often than not, news isn't faked outright in text in terms of the guy from Sky News Australia saying today Jason Olborn robbed the Royal Bank of Canada. No, the way that they fake the news is when an ally of theirs does something criminal, they discharacterize it or they pretend it never occurred. You can't, you open up the news, nothing about it. And if it didn't occur in the news, my goodness, it couldn't possibly have happened. I think that's just a conspiracy theory, Mr. Olborn. There you go, making things up again. We're going to have to shut your phone off for the month, spreading disinformation like that.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? Well, then, if we fast forward to the period of 45 and 47 and the second term of Trump in office, and we've seen the National Guard being used in Washington, D.C., and of course now even in Chicago. Just for fun, Nils, I'm just going to play you a short, very short, it's only a couple of seconds, a clip. This is taken out of Chicago Today based on what we've seen out of D.C. and the crime and the arrests, 1,007 arrests in a very short period of time, 86 of them overnight. But have a look at this.
The National Guard has to come here, even if it's for a scare tactic. They have to come here. There's no control. There's no law and order.
How about that? No law and order in Chicago, one of the great cities of the United States, if not the world. Where are we today, and what is the plan, do you think, and is Trump the one to fix the United States, or is he the last chance?
I think Donald Trump will do this, but he's showing the way for men like J.D. Vance and women like Pam Bondi, women like Tulsi Gabbard. He flushes every shade of gray from the room. They tell him, oh, you can't do this. The mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, who might as well be the commissar of Cook County, says you can't do this. Well, when did Donald Trump back down from anything, Mr. Olborn? He doesn't. So he flushes the shade of gray from the room. He deploys the National Guard and federal officers to Chicago. Brandon Johnson will go running his fat keister into court and file some sort of an injunction, and there'll be some, heretic in a black robe who will immediately issue a court order against it. But Donald Trump will force it up the appellate chain very quickly, and things will start to change. And when citizens see it changing for the positive, it's almost like that magic moment at the end of The Wizard of Oz when the dog pulls the curtain back and you see the man yanking the levers of power as just some guy. And that's all they are. The thieves. They've built an apparatus for themselves that's akin to a Ponzi scheme, a multi-level marketing scheme. And it's a system of spoils and power and protection by subscription, and we'll reward you with dog biscuits for feeding us steak, that sort of thing. And voters have gone along with it in places like Chicago for generation after generation. These Marxists aren't like the old good government Democrats who are also corrupt, like the Dailies, that sort of thing. In fact, Alan Pinkerton landed from Scotland in 1852 in Chicago and saw how corrupt it was and founded the original private detective service in that city. So they have a long history of criminality there. This is the first time, though, that they're openly celebrating their own corruption. And Brandon Johnson replaced an equally corrupt, unwise mayor in Lori Lightfoot. She was no different. They were cut from the same feculent cloth. The man steals with both hands, and he's dumb like a potted petunia. He has the intellect of a potted plant. That's it. He knows what he was taught. He took some garbage degree, a series of garbage degrees. At my expense, I paid for his garbage degrees from some state-funded arsehole factory. And he can spout all of the talking points of it, but what is he doing for the people of Chicago? Nothing. He's doing something to them. It's the public employee unions that prop him up. They have a fat, bloated bureaucracy and lots of NGOs there, just like in California. And the governor of that state, Pritzker, J.B. Pritzker, is a billionaire oligarch in a party that claims they hate billionaire oligarchs. He hopes to be president someday. He'll be fighting it out with the governor of California for the synthetic nomination of the Democrat cult. And the American political media, the international political media, will rally around them and coalesce behind them as if it's the second coming of Jesus of Nazareth, like John Lennon got yanked out of the grave and given a guitar. They'll love him.
Absolutely. What comes from here, therefore, Russiagate? Do you expect that there might be indictments through certain grand juries that have been suggested? And if so, could that change the Democrat Party structurally for a long time?
Structurally, Structurally, the only way to structurally change the Democrat cult at this point is to take power away from them. And the way you take power away from them is to fire the people who prop them up, the NGO people. Take away the tax money that is flowing from taxpayers to government to the NGOs and back to that party. So you short circuit the money. When you start taking the money and some of these people have to work for a living, I mean, seriously, what would you say to someone with a struggle study degree in transnormative underwater pre-Columbian homoerotic poetry that cost $250,000 from Columbia, another arsehole factory? What are you going to say to them in terms of employment? What would you pay them to do? Paper or plastic? Supersize that Big Mac for me, mate? Okay, these are unemployable people. They'll have to get real. They'll be reeled back to earth. That's how you do it. As far as I don't like to call it Russiagate because it cheapens the whole thing. It was a deep running fraud perpetrated against American voters, also against the voters who voted against Donald Trump. They were told to believe that Donald Trump was a puppet of Putin, and many of them still believe that. But the way to disabuse them of that is to put these men in prison. John Brennan, Clapper, Comey, Hillary Clinton. These people need to face serious, serious consequences. The reason that they went after Donald Trump was because they couldn't punish his voters in the same way, so they punished him. They hold men like me in high contempt, Mr. Oldborn. They hold you in high contempt, I promise.
Oh, there is no question. Anyone who here in Australia who questioned the narrative of the last 5 years was punished. They were vilified, they were mocked, they were censored, they were taken out. Social media pages, tens upon thousands of followers, gone in an instant. No right of appeal, no evidence used, no due process. That's just the way that the system worked. You're dead right, and this is the importance of what we're trying to achieve here through creating this show, the 51st state coming out of Australia. It has been one of the most profound, brilliant, enlightening discussions that I could ever have expected, Nils, to be able to tap into a great mind who has lived it, who has walked it, and you've literally seen it and been able to describe it from experience and observation. And I am absolutely delighted that we've been able to connect for this discussion today. And if it's possible, I'd like to publicly ask you if we can reconnect perhaps in 6 or 8 weeks at the other side of the House Oversight Committee investigations with Epstein, because I think that is just the tip of the iceberg about what we're seeing. What do you think?
I think that would be my sincere pleasure. I'd like to be on your show pretty much any day you'd care to include me. I hope I don't get you thrown in irons for my points of view on things Australian at this point. I think that the government isn't equal to the men and women who founded your nation, a rugged nation of frontiersmen and explorers and fishermen and men who made great sacrifice. The Aboriginal Australians were also rugged individuals. They were a perfect analog for the prisoners being landed ashore. Australia is a great place, and it can be made great again.
Yeah, not finer words could ever be spoken. It has been exactly right. Well said. Well, it's been a terrific interview, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time today, and I look forward to connecting again in the near future. In the meantime, I'm just going to put this up on screen for everyone. If you'd like to check out Nils's work in terms of these brilliant novellas that he wrote about a decade or so ago, please check them out on Amazon. And also, if you'd like to keep an eye out next year, the book, The Last Lawman, will certainly be some very, very interesting reading indeed. Well, thank you, Nils, and thanks everyone for watching. We'll conclude today's show there. I look forward to seeing you all on the next one. ANR.news, ANR headlines on X, or of course you can find me there, as you can see on the bottom of the screen, those 2 channels as well. But you've been watching the 51st State for ANR. Thank you. See you all on the next show. If you would like to hear or see the full interview, go to channel51.com.au or anr.news.